You're live.
We're back from break, Senate Transportation, talking about highway safety with Agency of Transportation. You know everybody here, Josh? We don't need to do introductions?
Yes, sir, we're good.
Okay, so we'll just hand it over to you and go through this presentation, and you can introduce the other staff as they need be.
Okay, that sounds good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joshua Schultz. I work for the Vermont Agency of Transportation, and I oversee the Operations and Safety Bureau. And before we started, we did have a question. Would you like me to do the Stowe Notch overview first, or do you want me to go through and adhere to the agenda and go with the safety trends?
Adhere to the agenda.
Okay, all right.
Ultimately, we just want to hear Senator Chipman say stuckage.
Stuckage, yes.
As long as we get to that.
Yeah. So, okay, well, we've got 45 minutes to talk about safety. So we're going to give you guys the 30,000 or maybe the 10,000 foot level. But we want to give you guys, hopefully when we leave, you guys will have an understanding of kind of our philosophy and what things we're doing with safety in the Agency of Transportation. So try to do this there. Okay. Agenda, you can see we got about 5 to 7 minutes for each topic. So I'm going to keep us moving here. Safe Systems and the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. That's what SHSP stands for. These are the overarching, I would say, like umbrella guidance, either philosophies or even documents or plans that we use at VTrans to drive our safety way of thinking, and also countermeasures and what we do, what we spend money on, et cetera. Safe Systems approach, think like almost like doctrine or philosophy on how we approach, and not just that. I mean, there's also action, but this is kind of our guiding philosophy or doctrine that we use when we're approaching safety on any front within the agency. So I think the big takeaway is think about like I have little kids. I don't want them to get into the cabinet under my sink. And this is my analogy here, because there's poisonous things under there, like cleaning things. So the first thing I do is I put a baby gate at the kitchen, by the kitchen counter, so they can't even get into the kitchen. The next thing I do is I put locks on my counter. On my cupboard, so they can't open them. And then I have, buy the cleaning agents that have special locks on them, so you can't just start squirting them and open them up. If all of these things fail, then the child could get in there and get access to poisonous stuff. Now take that over to highway safety. It's the same kind of a philosophy that we employ there, where we're looking at, we want safe drivers. We want also safe vehicles. We want safe roads. We want good care after a crash occurs, if it does occur. But we also want safe speeds as well. So these are all things that that we think about doctrinally, and we put up all of these different, I'll say, like barriers, so that if somebody happens to, all of these barriers fail, then death or serious injury could happen. And so when you see the Swiss cheese behind me, where the arrow goes through all the holes, that means we had a failure. That means all of our safety blocks didn't happen. And so this is sort of our doctrine. So I think the big takeaway here is, sorry, Senator Pitchell.
I do, because I think you could have death and serious injuries when only some of the layers fail. Say on a good clear day in the summer and on the interstate, and someone is going at excessive speeds or whatever, the road is safe. It's because of the speed and the road user. So that's what I'm just thinking. I see that this can happen when in fact some of the layers actually do not fail. But the ones that do fail, in fact, preempt everything else.
Absolutely correct. So basically what this is we set this up so that you're right. If only one fails, it could result in any kind of a fatality or.
So it's just when it happened when all fail.
If one fails, you could result in fatality or serious injury. And so what I would say is what you want is we're trying to tackle all of these different items or aspects in the hope that we will thwart a crash. And you're absolutely right. So, so with this, the other takeaway I think I'd like to give you guys, and we're going to get more into this in the next slide, is that historically across the country, and Vermont too, we've sort of looked at behavior and infrastructure almost separately. You know, we address them separately, but safe systems approach really marries the two together. So we don't care if it's a behavior issue or if it's a infrastructure issue. It's causing crashes. People are getting hurt. We need to fix it, and we need to all work together to do that. So that's my segue into the next slide here. Yes, sir.
And you bring that up so good, because in my town, we have a small little intersection where you have a sweeping curve, then you have a state highway that goes out, then you have a town road that goes off of it. And there's so much concern right there, but it really gets down to the user of the automobile, just recognizing where that is and being cautious. And we've talked to V-Trans about it. Okay, what are we gonna do about that dangerous intersection? Well, let's educate those drivers just to recognize it's dangerous and be safer.
Yep.
But that's a hard message to get out
But
there.
maybe you can engineer the intersection
Yeah.
to
Yep.
minimize.
And you just described an example of a meeting that we could have on any given day, where, you know, we look at the crash data. It's a table that looks like this, but it's different. We have our sleeves rolled up and we're looking at crash patterns at one individual intersection. And then you look at the data and you're looking at what caused the crash, and you see that, you know, one person was drunk. They were drunk driving. One person was going 80 miles an hour in a 40, and another person was distracted on their phone. And then you see a couple of people where there might be some conflicts that happen at the intersection. And, you know, as engineers, you know, and safety professionals, or I'm sorry, behavioral kind of professionals, I'll say, you know, we scratch our head and we're like, well, we're probably not going to necessarily engineer our way through this, but there are behavioral concerns here. So how can we help get the message out there? How can we change behavior? And that's a hard topic. It's a hard thing to do. I think everybody knows that. But we're working hard to do that, and we are doing a lot of good things in the area of driver behavior, and we are going to get to that later in the presentation. You know, specifically of some stuff that we're doing, and we are seeing some benefits from that, we think. But yeah, what you just described is a good example where, you know, we do our best, and there are times that we can engineer some things in there where we might be able to kind of notify drivers that, hey, you know,
You need a roundabout.
dangerous curve ahead, or delineate the curve, things like that, you know. So
To your point, is what you just said. There's another section of road, not in my district, but it comes off of a town road onto Route 14. It comes to a T. It's just right there. I mean, you know where it's at, and these people, and it's a long hill to get down to Route 14, and people come bombing down through. Next thing you know, sail right across the highway into the cornfield. One person I know did twice. And then what you did is you put a flashing light there, and just to catch attention. But it was like, how many people can do that? It's right there. But it is, but you guys fixed it.
Yeah, it was
flashing light there.
it was a poor choice made by drivers, but we tried to just raise awareness that, hey, if you're about to make a poor choice, think again. Hopefully that flashing light might do that. So the Vermont Strategic Highway Safety Plan is something we do every 5 years. We are required to do it, but we do it gladly and lovingly. And what this does is it's data driven. We look at the data, which tells us a story, but I would say more importantly than that, based on the data, we get the right people to the table. We get all kinds of different people in different walks of life, different professions, and that are all, you know, part of our, I would say, like, safety partners. And we get them all to the table, and we look at the data, and then we devise a plan that for the next 5 years to do our best to bring, well, specifically fatalities and serious injuries, but all crashes down. Right now, we're looking to reduce our fatalities and serious injuries by 10%.
Based on what baseline?
It's based on I'll say 5-year rolling average. So we look at the averages over 5 years, and that's our baseline. And we do that because one of the things about Vermont and other states too, but we don't have a huge data set. So that makes it hard. So we absolutely do. And,
They could just blow your
yeah,
up and down.
every number is a fatality and it's terrible. And when we look at the numbers and it's 71 versus 74 or and when they go down, when the crashes or fatalities go down by a few fatalities, like we're really excited, we're happy because these are lives we're talking about. But at the same time, it's hard with those low numbers to kind of claim victory that we've done everything, and hey, we've won this year, so to speak, because we haven't. People still died. So we work hard to do everything we can to bring the numbers down, whether it's infrastructure or behavior, working together to do that. And I just wanted to, I guess, go over some of the things that we do look at. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go to the next slide here because I just want to keep things moving. But we look at, like, based on the data, we look at what we call critical emphasis areas. You'll probably see the phrase, or you might in some of the things you read, CEAs, critical emphasis areas. I'm not going to go into detail on the slide, but I just wanted you to kind of see behind me that these critical emphasis areas are all based on data. We identified them based on data, based on what's causing crashes.
Speed and aggressive driving, not behavioral.
So it's because there are things we can do for speed. So there is certainly behavioral
Speed
component.
bumps.
There are speed bumps, but there's also like speed limits, there are things like that. But it's all tied together, and it's a good point you make. So it's really hard to divide these things up because behavior and infrastructure, and even the vulnerable road users part, it's all tied together. And but for the purposes of the document and how we sort of have to organize it some way, that's what we do. So speed limits are something that we set within the agency of transportation, our infrastructure side of the house.
These are percentages of reductions in crashes for those areas.
That's what those are our goals of how we want to reduce them. That's
so you want 50% less crashes in intersections.
Yes. And I think the bigger picture, as we step back from looking at we can certainly zero in on anything here, but is I just wanted to kind of show that infrastructure, behavior, vulnerable road users, these are all things that we look at, but they're really all part of this one umbrella document. And I think that's important to highlight because it is kind of a doctrinal shift over the last few, probably 5 years. I'd say nationwide, but certainly in Vermont too, where we're like, hey, we got to look at all this stuff together. We all need to work together. It's not just the engineers at VTrans looking at making intersections safer and fixing roads. And then, I'll say DPS, DMV working on the behavioral side. We all need to work together, and we do. We all get to the table and make positive change wherever we can, and it's based on the data. I think that's a good segue. We want to talk to you a little bit about some of the data that we look at. And Mandy Shatney is here. Mandy Shatney is here. And she oversees, within our bureau, she oversees the data management section. And so she's going to talk to you a little bit. Mandy, do you want to come right up? That might be easier. And I'm going to sit right here. Certainly help field questions too, Mandy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do I need to introduce myself again? Thank you.
Just what your title is?
Yeah, Mandy Shatney. I'm the manager of the data analysis section of the Operations and Safety Bureau.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful. All right, so I thought I'd start this morning talking about this. I know the Secretary Flynn showed you both of these a couple weeks ago when he did his testimony. I wanted to put these back on the screen just to remind you. Last year we had 70 fatalities. That number hasn't changed. Thankfully, we still have a couple more weeks before we can really finalize that number. And all of these numbers for 2023 I'm going to talk about.
Is the green line, is that what it is?
Nope. Yes, it is. Sorry. The green line with the blue dots or blue triangles or diamonds. Yeah. So we ended up just below last year and the year before, I believe. I can't see on the other side of the screen, but
it's an interesting choice to present the data in this graph.
Yeah.
It's not that helpful, actually. I
Okay.
mean, because the monthly change of because it's not monthly crashes, it's just accumulative over
Yes,
the
it
year.
is.
So it's just, so it does show you how many crashes in that month if you do the math. But it's hard to see the trends, which I think is the most interesting thing here. Is
Yeah.
like from 18 to 24, how the trends are.
Mhm.
But to do that, you have to kind of go to the end and then look down.
Or why is 19 such an anomaly,
Yeah, which we don't know.
There's no,
which we don't know.
there were less crashes that year overall.
So how can you have a line for 2024?
There's no line, it's just a dot in
It's just a square
January
at
at
the
the bottom. Yeah, because we have no
Oh, I
fatalities
see.
so far this year.
Oh, that's,
Yeah,
That's good. Yeah.
it's a bit of a, I mean, the visual is mostly just to show the comparison as you go through the months to previous years. It's just a different way to visualize it. We have a couple
Oh, I
different
see.
ways
So
we
you
do
could just
it.
like, yeah, I guess a bar chart for each year would be.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting. May seems to have the greatest, well, might be the greatest,
I get it.
yeah.
I'm interested, weather-wise, I agree, the cumulative approach makes it less easy to detect if there's a pattern across the years in the summertime versus winter and fall, but.
Summer, we do have the most number of crashes, fatal crashes.
This is fatalities, not
Correct.
crashes.
Correct.
Are there more crashes in the winter?
Yes. There's more crashes in the winter, but there's more fatalities in the summer.
Is that also, there's more miles traveled in the summer?
Potentially, yeah. There's also a lot more, I would say, behavioral
You
things
tend to
happen
drive, you might have a
faster.
fender bender because of the ice and snow,
Right.
but you're not gonna get killed generally.
I think speeding
But,
goes up.
Right.
those
So,
tend to be,
clear road,
you drive.
or is it the tourists? But they come in the summer, in the winter.
Yeah, we've got tourists all times of the year usually. So anyway, I just wanted to put this back up here to remind you all of what Secretary Flynn.
Now,
So-
what happens if you've got, you fall into multiple categories? Say you're a junior license and you also are suspected under the influence of drugs and it's a triple fatality. How do you account for those multiple factors at play? And
They fall into every category.
They're counted
Yeah.
each time.
So,
So that the columns don't add up to the.
correct, yeah.
like,
We're just kind of checking.
well, assuming that there are a number that are multiple boxes.
Yeah, they're definitely.
And there are many of our fatalities that fall into multiple categories. A lot of times there's, alcohol or drugs or both. They're not belted, they're speeding, right? So they're hitting a lot of those categories.
As a percentage of drivers, motorcyclist fatalities relative to the total.
Are you looking at the,
Disproportionate percentage.
Table.
still the table?
Last
Okay,
line.
yeah. As a percentage of all drivers or all drivers in fatal crashes?
Fatal crashes.
Yeah, I don't have that number. I actually didn't look that.
No, but I'm thinking out of the number of motorcyclists
On the road.
on the road
Mhm.
in Vermont, drivers that are on a motorcyclist, to have 18 fatalities. It just, to me, it brings home the risk of use of.
There's a lot fewer motorcycles, but they have a higher percentage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm observing, which would suggest that that's a risky mode of, who has a motorcycle other than Senator Benjamin?
No, I've ridden a motorcycle, but I don't have one now.
No, so.
And it's a shorter time frame, right? They're not on the roads all year long. They're on the roads in that summertime span as well.
So that would suggest even
Are we,
higher risk.
taking out cannabis as far as the drugs? Cannabis has its own column, so if it's a cannabis, it's not getting counted as drugs as well?
It
that-
is.
Okay, it is or is not?
It is.
Okay,
So
it
in
would be
that
twice.
20
Okay,
or in that 5, in those 2 boxes, there are 14 of those were cannabis. It doesn't mean that they weren't, that cannabis wasn't included with other drugs.
Yeah.
We were asked many years ago, I think when we started, when the state started looking at cannabis, we pulled it out so that it was prominent in this chart. So it's just a count there.
On the next slide, you
Yeah.
get more motorcycle data for you.
So yeah, on the next slide, I just did a quick comparison from 22 to 23. Again, remembering that 23 is not final, but overall fatalities at this time we had a 9% decrease. So we had that 76 to 70. Impaired fatalities, there is a decrease. It's unknown at this time because we still do not have toxicology for the last month or month and a half of fatalities. So I didn't dare make any specific percentage here. Unbelted fatalities, currently we're looking at a 28% decrease. Speed-related fatalities is a 14% decrease. And if we go back to that chart on the previous slide, I mean, that's only a difference of 3. So when we look, whoops, wrong way.
The numbers are small.
they're
You get
so
such
small.
when you're doing percentages, it really,
Correct.
you know,
So that was kind of what one of my points is. Our numbers are so small. I mean, obviously they're tragedy, every single one of these people
you had
and
one
their
and it went
families.
to 2, I mean,
Yes.
double. Yeah.
Motorcyclist fatalities, we saw a 28% increase. That's a number, that's actually 4 more motorcyclists. When I started looking back to see how long it's been since we've had this number of motorcyclist fatalities, this is the highest number we've had since we started tracking it in 2004.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, that's something to look into a little further.
Does the data flesh out why that is?
No, and we actually are working, my team has been working on the last several weeks on some analysis on motorcycle fatalities and crashes. So I'm hoping to figure out if we can do like a VMT for motorcyclists specifically to see what that number is. So we can do that with our traffic data that we collect.
Or is there just more registrations? Are there more motorcycles?
Right, that's another thing. We gotta go out to DMV and ask for registrations and look at that too. So definitely digging into this one currently.
Right, it'd be interesting to know as a former motorcycle driver how much was another vehicle involved and how much is this just a motorcycle driver losing control?
Yeah, and I didn't bring that number with me. How many are multiple vehicle versus single vehicle? But I believe that's part of the analysis now. So moving on, I just put a couple of these things into some graphs for you to give you an idea. Fatal crashes where driver was impaired. You see that kind of dip in 18 and 19, and it's slowly been increasing over the last several years for impaired driving. We can break it out in several different ways, which is the chart on my right. I believe it's on your right too. So alcohol only, alcohol and Delta 9, and then we move into all the different other categories. So I've been trying to track that for several years now to see what that percentage of crashes looks like. I did the same thing for unbelted. Our unbelted number did come down a little bit this year. Like I mentioned earlier, we still have 7 unknown, so that number could change a little bit once we get a few more crash reports in.
Can you remind me, because you're doing the data, but you're also looking at the data and talking to the engineers about what can be done about it. Isn't there a transportation safety council or something like that?
I'm sorry?
Like a transportation safety council?
There is a transportation safety council.
And so what do they do in relation to what you guys are doing?
I don't know. I don't talk to them generally. Do you know much about that?
I don't know anything about that. I didn't know if you were referring to the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance. That's what I was kind of, but.
Is there a council and an alliance?
I don't know anything about the council.
Yeah.
I've never worked with them. I don't know anything about that. What
You know if it exists? Like, is there one?
I thought.
You don't know? Okay.
I don't know. We have what's called Vermont Highway Safety Alliance. And that is something, I don't know if that's what you're asking about, but that is sort of everybody at the table kind of thing.
The
Actually,
governors.
That's what the governor's highway.
Oh.
Governor's, we're gonna talk, sorry, we'll talk to that. That is part of our team.
I do know about that.
And we will speak to that in the next section. 7-minute
And
segment.
not call the council?
No, it's the governor's highway safety program, but it's the state highway safety
And it was
office.
moved in from public safety to AMT
Yes.
a few years ago.
Yes.
Is bicycles, electric bicycles in the same category, or is that gonna be separate?
They're currently in the same category. We actually, we just,
Category of what?
of bicycles.
Bike.
Yes.
Yeah.
we do, so in my work, we have a thing called a model minimum, uniform crash criteria. They just came out with a 6th edition of that. We are putting together a subcommittee from our traffic records coordinating committee to look at the crash report form and suggest some updates to it. One of those should be, or we will be looking at all of these e-bikes and, yeah, I think there's all kinds of different new contraptions out there that people are riding around on.
That still puzzles me because I don't know what the rights of the highway of an electric bike versus a regular bicycle is. And that's still a question I've been trying to get answered. Is there going to be a difference of laws on does an electric bike have the same right of way as an automobile or not?
That is a really good question, Senator Mazza, and I can't answer that. I think that would probably fall under a DMV.
That's separated, find out what the future, because we know there's more electric bikes on the road these days, which is good. But on the other hand, what rules do they follow? Do they follow the rules of the automobile or do they follow the rules of the bicyclist? And so I don't know how that's going to be distinguished.
It's a really good question, and I do know that some of those bicycles do go quite fast.
Yeah, up
So
to 30 miles. I heard up to 30 miles an hour, or 30, 33 or something like that. So
Yeah.
that's got to be a factor sooner or later.
it is. It is.
Thank you.
I would have to ask DMV about
Okay.
the laws. Any other questions on this slide? I can move on. I did watch the testimony a couple weeks ago, and I know there was some questions about daytime, nighttime crashes. So we pulled together a couple of visualizations for you. One of them on the left is fatality count by year and light condition. As you can see, the blue is the nighttime, the yellow would be light or daytime. And then on the other side is the annual trends by crash type, and that's for all crashes. So showing similar, so fatal, injury, and property damage only. Fatal obviously is so small on these that it's difficult to see, but obviously you can see the daytime is the higher number of crashes.
Just because you've got more drivers.
Right, correct. And then I added in here a couple of picture or graphs of pedestrian and motorcyclist fatalities, just to show the trends. So pedestrian fatalities are still trending down or almost even, and then the motorcyclist fatalities, as we talked about in the last couple slides, are rising. So.
But it's as a percentage of the total, so you could have more pedestrian fatalities in one year, but still have a decrease in the percentage.
Correct. Yeah. Right. And then the last thing, I know Josh touched on 5-year rolling averages. I just wanted to touch on it again. We always, when we're looking at the SHSP and data, we use a 5-year rolling average. It's a standard national approach. It's not something that Vermont just decided to do because of our numbers. All states use that approach. And it's used to control the statistical fluctuations as was talked about earlier.
Well, then when you move out and drop 2019 from your 5-year rolling average, then that'll obviously influence your average.
Absolutely.
Senator Eagle?
Do we have a statistic about the deaths, whether they're in-state people or out-of-state people?
Yeah, we do actually, and it's mostly in-state. Yep. We just barely, and it's not in here, and I wasn't asked to testify about that,
No
but
problem.
we just finished a crash story map for 2022, which is on our website. I can direct you to it. Take a peek at it. Yeah. So.
And I think we probably are having more visitors than we do have population. And just, yeah, kind of just wondering.
So there
They
should
tend to be families and older people, and they probably are, their behaviors might be a little less risky.
Do you have any sense of how we compare as a state to other states? Any benchmarking with how our trends are?
Depends on which category you're looking at. Our fatalities, for the last year, I haven't looked around. Usually we get on a call with other New England states and we haven't had one of those recently, so I don't know where they're all trending, but we were all, I think, trending down, last I heard, so.
And as like a per capita fatalities per capita, are we outliers or just on the average?
We are, so if you, per capita, we usually do it by VMT, which is vehicle miles traveled. We come up with a crash rate for that. And our number has fluctuated with the VMT because of COVID, and the lack of traffic on the roads. But this year, our I don't know what 2023 VMT is gonna be, but I'm hoping that if it stays a little more in line with 2022, our crash rate will come down, which will be nice.
But is that ratio of vehicle miles traveled for fatalities or crashes, how does that compare to other states?
We are typically lower than other states.
Good, let's keep it up.
Yeah, I think that's it. If you don't have any other questions for me. All right, thank you.
Behavioral interventions, oh wow.
Thanks,
Any behavioral intervention?
I don't know, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't drink soda, I don't buy lottery tickets, so I don't think I'm high risk.
So Evelyn McFarlane, she oversees our
I hardly carry my phone, so,
You're not looking at your phone?
no.
Can I do the arrow keys? Is that right? Or the space bar?
You don't have a seat?
Seatbelts. Huh?
No airbag?
Oh, I have airbags.
Okay.
Oh, except the model.
Probably a single strap sheet metal.
Yes,
Elizabeth
okay.
doesn't have any of the above. She even has a crank.
So arrows or space bar?
The space bar is how I did it, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning. Thank you for
morning.
having us here. Evelyn McFarland. I am the Deputy Administrator at the State Highway Safety Office. And I'm here to talk about the sort of, I suppose you could call them the first three layers of Josh's Swiss cheese. We are the behavioral arm of the program. And so we work to prevent crashes through education, through high visibility law enforcement, and also through outreach and media. We get awards from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which we call NHTSA, and we award those to our local, state, and nonprofit organizations for the behavioral grants. And the majority of our funding does go to the law enforcement for their overtime enforcement, but also for education. This year we have a record number of law enforcement agencies who've applied for education grants, which we like. And then also, as I say, that sort of pot of money, the majority goes to law enforcement and the education outreach. NHTSA's priorities are very much our priorities. We start with data, right? We use the data that Mandy gives us, the who, what, when, where, and how of crashes. We give that information to our grantees. They use that data to prepare their grant applications to us, since we are the granting unit. And we also then use the data to evaluate them and then to make our decisions and make our priority list of where the funding is going to go. So our data really dovetails with NHTSA's data in that the four critical areas, we call these the four biggies, the four big problems, are year after year: impaired driving, distracted driving, speed and aggressive driving. So those are the causal factors. And then of course, seatbelt use, which is what we would like to have in play in case somebody does make the mistake of getting into a crash based on these causal factors. The hope is that restraint will then mitigate the severity of the crash. So these four are our focus. And we grant year to year, our granting agencies, we have up to 80 grants on average per year through the different entities that we fund. And I certainly can't go through all of our activities, but I did want to highlight some of our educational activities. You mentioned the fact that many crashes are, Senator, you mentioned many crashes are behavioral in nature, and that is true. Over 90% of crashes are caused by a human decision that was made in error. So to try to work with our partners, our stakeholders, and I just want to mention, we were formerly called the Governor's Highway Safety Office. We are now the State Highway Safety Office. So we are that same entity. We are that same granting unit. And we work with a variety of stakeholders, everything from the Department of Health, we work with the DMV, we work with the driver educators, as well as law enforcement. So we fund the various activities that these grantees are involved in based on the data. So the data can also help them highlight the areas that they need to focus on, especially if it's a state agency. We can also identify areas such as the Northeast Kingdom, which we've known to have a lower seatbelt use rate based on our surveys. So we're able to tailor the funding to go to the areas, following the data continuously to help with that work.
What part of AMT is the State Safety Office?
The State Highway Safety Office is under with the Operations and Safety Bureau. Yes, we are that same unit. And we are also looking at the data to tell us that there are some overrepresented areas, age-wise. Young drivers are overrepresented in our crash data. So we have a program.
Little boys under 25 driving pickup trucks.
You've been reading the data. Yes. Yes.
That's exactly.
They are
what I got
definitely.
it from.
Yes, they're definitely one of the groups that we do try to get our education and activities
But
out
that's not a
to
new thing. That's been probably the leader group for
decades. Yes, but we also think drivers, younger drivers, are not only overrepresented in the crash data, but we also do believe that if you make a young driver safe, they will grow up to be an older driver who is also driving safely. So we hope that that's sort of the long-term view of the work you do up front that will then hopefully pay off at the end. Last year, we had a new partner, year before last, the Vermont Principals Association. I'm just highlighting this because it is a fairly new program that is doing well. They are going into the high schools and they are doing a program called Choices Matter. So they go into the classrooms with the students and engage them on their motto is Choices Matter. So they're trying to engage them to think about the choices that they're making. They also then participate at the high school sporting events. So that's sort of maximum outreach and contact. And that logo is traffic safety is a team sport. And even more importantly, I think are very important, is that they are able to push a lot of information out on social media, because that is where most teens live, right? They live on their phones. And so they are able to connect through the social channels. And then you had mentioned the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance. We had talked about that. That is a community of stakeholders that go out to community events, such as the Champlain Valley Fair, National Night Out, Lake Monsters Game. And one of the things that the State Highway Safety Office funds and works with the Sheriff's Association is the rollover car that you see in the slide here, which is for seatbelt outreach. I call it the car on the shish kebab. It spins around, there are dummies inside, and they are seatbelted, and so they demonstrate to whoever is there for the demonstration that how easy it is to actually eject the vehicle if it is in a rollover crash. So we have many of these partners, including private entities that are nonprofits. AAA has a foundation, and they are very involved in highway safety. They come to Vermont every year in the spring to do their outreach for distracted driving. And I do want to jump quickly to another project that has been going now for about 2 years, but every year increases, and that is our Drive Well Vermont media campaign. We our task at NHTSA to have the grantees, the law enforcement grantees, do 3 high visibility enforcement campaigns every year for distracted driving, for impaired driving, and for occupant protection. And NHTSA does have guidelines that allow us to evaluate the work that we're doing. They have a book, it's called Countermeasures That Work, and they rank through a starring system, 1 star to 5 stars, so it's similar to hotels. A 5-star activity is something that they 3 to 5 stars is what they encourage us to support. And law enforcement always gets high ranking in the stars, but when you put law enforcement and you couple it with media outreach, high visibility campaigns, dovetailing with a media blitz, so to speak, that's considered an effective and an evaluated campaign by NHTSA to be fairly effective. So we have a Drive Well campaign that is on the media calendar is on the same schedule as these high visibility enforcement campaigns. So the idea is that there's law enforcement on the road, you're seeing commercials on TV, at the gas stations, on your phone. So all of this is to promote a very strong message, to sort of develop a traffic safety culture, so to speak, so that we are, continually getting the message out that these are important times, these are important topics. And I do want to have a shout out to the group, the 2 people that developed this. There's a woman in our office, Rachel Noyes, and then Amy Taitko from VTrans developed this campaign. It was honored by NHTSA at one of the conferences. It has won an award, and Rachel Noyes from our unit has been asked to present the whole Drive Well campaign at a national conference in Denver. So it has been seen as a success. It's continually being developed and continually being measured by the metrics that are provided to us.
So, what would those metrics be? The reduction in serious crashes?
That is one of the metrics, and that would be a long-term metric that we would measure. But as we say, in the interim, they measure the success by the number of, there are a whole bunch of terms. One is, yes, the number of impressions, how many times it actually makes it onto somebody's screen. Then there's engagements that I believe includes sharing, clicking into it, liking.
I would think, I could watch
It's
the
considered
screen.
a successful marketing campaign if people are interacting with it, but not
On
necessarily.
TV, you wouldn't know if they're interacting.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Probably not, yes.
This is, through people's
Yes.
phones.
Right,
Yes.
that
Yes.
you would, but
Yeah, so it gets measured by the immediate interaction with the media
I
or
would think that's
social
the place
media,
of use and stuff.
But
right?
we don't know if it's changing behavior until we look at that 5-year rolling average.
Exactly, right. And then even when we look at the 5-year rolling average, it's not always easy to know what of the various, activities that have been
The
implemented.
question is, if you know where your high-risk group is,
Mhm.
what are the most effective strategies to get behavior changes or information out? And I'm talking about, once again, what your data show,
Mhm.
are, the high-risk, people on the road. So do these, for example, would these influence the behavior of young males in their pickup truck? Don't know the answer.
So I'm not sure what you're asking, but if it is that, we do try to use the data to, for
I know.
instance.
In other words, does this appeal, a child, seatbelt saves lives? How would that be received by that higher risk driver group? I don't know, that's what I'm just saying. It certainly would appeal to people who have children
Right,
or
right.
grandchildren or whatever, but to the young and immortals, I don't know.
Yes, and I think there is an effort in the media campaign to try to appeal to the different demographics, the age groups, and they use geo-targeting to decide where they're pushing the media out. The overall strategy of the campaign is to tap into Vermont's pride, really, that we are a proud state, we are a strong state, and the campaign tries to use that as a way of, I don't know, maybe so a hook, but that is a way to kind of appeal to Vermonters to be proud of their state and and to, make the right choices.
We're gonna get a bell ringing.
Okay.
So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I did want to offer up, yeah,
Friday, you're wishing the week away, so.
Yeah, okay. So go ahead.
So we do have another segment to talk about infrastructure stuff. Would you like, but right now we're biting into our time for the chicane, for the notch smugs piece. Do you want?
You don't have other things, so we have time to.
Okay. Go ahead. Ian DeGudas here. Ian oversees he's our state traffic engineer. He's part of the Operations and Safety Bureau. And Ian, worked with Ian for years. Go ahead, Ian. And he also obviously V-Trans employee, and we're working with me. So.
Good morning. Ian DeGudas, State Traffic Engineer in the Operations and Safety Bureau at V-Trans. I'm going to speak a little bit about engineering countermeasures with regard to safety. I'll try to be quick, respectful of people's time. Let's figure out how to make this go. Here we go. So you see the acronym HSIP up there. That's the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's a core federal aid program that gives money to states to make safety improvements on roadways. There's eligibility criteria associated with it. It is driven by the Strategic Highway Safety Plan that Josh mentioned. It's in alignment with that. It's a data-driven program. It's infrastructure focused. It's not the only way we spend money on safety, but it is a program. And it applies to all roads across the state, both state and local jurisdiction. And so as part of looking at this, and over the last couple of years, we've been taking a look at how we approach this topic. And one of the things we did was taking a sort of a step back and looking at our crash trends and where crashes are happening, what types of crashes they are, and trying to come up with a target for how we allocate the money in alignment with those crashes. So this is definitely aspirational. This is where we're trying to get to. We're not quite there right now. But you'll see divide between both systemic and site-specific, which I will speak to in a moment, but also across urban areas and rural areas of the state, and then state system roads and local jurisdiction roads. And so I mentioned the site-specific and the systemic.
Roundabouts right there. Huh?
Yeah.
Yep, that is I believe that's the Burlington one. So site-specific, site-specific is probably what a lot of people think of when they think about a safety project. It's, looking at a particular location, you evaluate the crashes, you determine what countermeasures might be appropriate, and then you construct them. So that'll be these roundabouts, or maybe you remove a slip ramp where there's a safety concern coming off an interstate. So that's the site-specific piece of these. They're single locations typically, and fairly expensive for that location. You look at the specific crashes there.
Do we have a list of intersections that would be desirable for a roundabout, like
desirable for a roundabout?
For safety reasons?
I'm not sure we have that specific list. I think it's generally approached more from the other angle. We would be looking at locations where there's a need for safety improvement, and then at each location evaluate what safety improvements would be most appropriate there.
Right. Most appropriate by cost.
Well, cost and perhaps there's environmental factors. What's the crash pattern? What are the volumes, et cetera? But yes.
And do you have the space for around that?
Yeah, all that.
Some of the things, for example, for crash, trees growing so close and shading and creating ice. I've noticed you've been doing quite a bit of removal of foliage and trees and brush in certain areas, particularly where it creates shading. So that's kind of a low-tech response, but I would assume that it's, it's a way of keeping the roads safer.
And that actually fits perfectly into my systemic slide here.
Oh, am I?
You're following along right with me, Senator.
I want you to know that I appreciate your use of hyphens. Just to let you know, site-specific and data-driven.
There's a lack of a hyphen.
There was. I brought it up yesterday.
So
using a possessive pronoun with a gerund.
I was a teacher.
No, I had Miss Exley. See her leaning over my shoulder. So, but all right. So I'm on the some of those other ways of
Yeah, so
intervening.
systemic, and this is, I'll say a newer approach to some of this, is acknowledging that crashes don't always happen at, at intersections or at what I'll say discrete locations that people are running off the road in lots of locations. And I guess to back up a little bit to where Josh was talking about the safe systems approach, one of the components of that is sort of acknowledging that people are going to make mistakes. Maybe they make an unsafe choice. Maybe they're driving too fast. Let's try to have a road environment that reduces, hopefully eliminates fatal and serious injuries when they make a mistake, when they drive too fast. So let's have a road that if you drive off it, you land, to your example earlier, in a cornfield rather than in a tree. Because a cornfield typically is going to be less likely to result in those injuries. So the systemic approach is acknowledging that there's that element of randomness, that we're not just going to follow every crash, cut down the tree that somebody hit, and then, because the next person might hit a tree a quarter mile up the road or whatever. So systemic approach is evaluating different risk factors, curve radii, whole variety of different factors, about 14 of them, I think, in our analysis, shoulder width, and evaluating those, and then looking at the state as a whole and identifying locations where a lot of the highest risk factors exist in one location, and then identifying that as a high risk location where we can make some countermeasures. So the example slide here is cutting trees back in locations that are at high risk for a run off the road crash. And so this is upgraded curve sign is another one. To identify a high risk curve, we might put in more signs than we typically would. And so that's a different approach, because you're sometimes doing work at a location where there hasn't been a crash in 30 years, and people sort of look at you and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. And it's trying to get ahead of those crashes rather than it's trying to be proactive rather than reactive, I guess is a good way to put it. So that's the systemic approach. And then systematic, which did not land explicitly in that previous slide, but I do want to add it here, is systematic safety countermeasures are ones we do everywhere. It's something that you say, is this a good idea? We should do this whenever we're doing a project.
Back to the roundabout. Is there a study that shows for where you put roundabouts versus when they weren't there, that they have reduced crashes?
Yes. And
The severity of crashes is much less.
Reduced severity, yes.
Fatalities go away.
Yep. And that's basically, the cars are all going slowly. So
And you're not gonna get a deep conflict points.
Yeah, like downhill coming down the Route 2.
Yeah. If we
Yes.
had space, it would be a good round.
Yeah. But also roundabouts are also more fuel efficient, and they keep traffic flow much smoother. So you're getting kind of, not only are they safer, but they have other benefits.
Yep. There's a lot of good things to be said for
And the
roundabouts,
rumble
for sure.
strips, is the policy to any new road construction has rumble strips?
Within certain criteria. And so rumble strips, and I don't have the criteria off the top of my head,
It's
but
like
it
Route
would
2,
speed
maybe
and-
they're still coming, but I was expecting with that project that there would be rumble strips, but I haven't.
I
Not
can't
in the new
speak to
stretch, they
that
certainly are
portion.
heading toward New Hampshire. There's rumble strips all along
Right.
that section.
Would you have thought with all that work that they did?
Yeah, they're
that
coming
rumble
back to that
strips?
project.
But maybe that's
Yeah.
something you do at the very end.
It would be one of the last features constructed. I can't speak to that
And then there
particular
was
project.
complaints because they're so loud, so you modified the.
Yeah,
depth
so
of the,
there's
Right.
changes in geometry.
Yeah.
And also you change it near residence? Or it's just?
Yes, proximity to a residence is one of the criteria. I'm not sure exactly what the distance is, but yes, that is one of the criteria that's used in evaluating them.
The only problem is if there's no traffic coming and you tend to, when you're doing the corner, you tend to hit the rumble strip.
Yeah, what it reminds me.
Yeah, it does remind you, it's right.
But just to finish up the systematic countermeasures here, so rumble strips are something we do everywhere that they're appropriate. The signal backplates, you can see the slide there, you've probably seen these appearing on more signals in the area. That yellow strip around it, retroreflective, has been proven to be very beneficial in reducing crashes at signalized intersections. It's very inexpensive, so anytime we replace a backplate, we install that as a matter of course. Similarly with the safety edge, that's a pebble on the side of the pavement. So if you accidentally drop a tire off the edge of the road, it's easier to get your car back up on it and maintain control. Again, that acknowledgement that people are going to make mistakes. Let's try to make it so that
And
they,
you got rid of guardrails and did slopes. as well in places.
Where possible, yes. If they go off a safe recoverable slope, then they just get stuck in the snowbank or in the grass. That's safer than if they hit a guardrail. So that's the site-specific, systemic, and systematic crashes. One of the other things I wanted to touch on really quickly, and I know we're tight on time here, so I'm just going to hit this very, very briefly, is I mentioned that the HSIP programs includes both state roads and local roads, all roads open to public travel. And so acknowledging that delivering state projects for small improvements on local roads is sort of can be a challenge. You get a bunch of towns together and, you know, the timelines become difficult. So we're working on, it's still very much a work in progress, but we're working on setting up a granting program to grant money to municipalities to make safety improvements through our municipal assistance program, trying to work with them to support them through the federal aid process of making those improvements, but working to help towns make safety improvements with both resources and dollars.
Where's the photograph?
That is a great question. I'm actually not sure.
You see some wonderful photographs.
Good New Hampshire, we don't have.
No,
I can see New Hampshire from where I live.
and then I believe I'm back to you.
Okay, our favorite topic.
Oh, what's the chicane?
We'll find out, I bet.
I can hardly wait.
I saved the best for last.
Oh.
Josh Schultz here again, VTrans Operations Safety Bureau. Yes, so chicane. So Smugglers Not Chicane project update. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. We're going to jump right in. So I'm going to get to the chicane in a second. I don't want to give the punchline right away. Roads. We had a road safety audit review a few years ago. A road safety audit review is just when you get all the right players together, different, you know, you want to get, and you see it in the bottom left for me, sure, you have bottom left for you too. You get all the right stakeholders there. So you get, it's not just, you get private and also you get public. So you get law enforcement, you get first responders, you get, we have, Senator Westman was there, Representative Sherman was there, you get our planning folks, we get the resorts, AOT, A&R, and others, if they're interested. Certainly, you know, we don't exclude anybody from coming. We're trying to make the area safer. And what it is you go to a site, in this case, we went to Smuggler's Notch where trucks were getting stuck, and everybody just has, you know, a real grown-up conversation, like everything out on the table. Let's see what the problem is. How can we fix it? And we throw out lots of different options. And in the end, the idea is that then you get actionable next steps. So it's a very collaborative approach. And one of the things that came out of this, I'll say RSAR, this audit, was, hey, let's do a scoping study. A lot of ideas were thrown out there. Let's do a scoping study and really dig into it. Public involvement, all of the above, and see what could be done out there and what people kind of buy into. So the scoping study was done. Roundabouts was one of the things that came up. Putting a roundabout on either side of the notch, and you all know. I'll just say it for anybody that may not know. Problem is, trucks are getting stuck up in the notch. They're getting hung up on the rocks. They're too big. We have signed it. Every location imaginable, even on I-89, you see the signs, and people still end up. Some truckers still wind up on the notch. So roundabouts was one idea. And by the way, one of the things is trucksters say, well, there's no place to turn around. You know, they've said that before. And so it's like, hey, well, a roundabout would solve that. It was going to force them to slow down, make them read some signs, and then they could say, oh, shoot, I really shouldn't be here, and then hopefully do the roundabout. But I don't want to camp there. Roundabouts are expensive. There was going to be right-of-way issues, environmental issues. There was all kinds of things that said, well, it's a great idea, but maybe not feasible at this point in time anyway.
And it also doesn't prevent them from just going through the round.
They can still continue straight on.
Which is what they would do, is my guess.
So we talked about WAVE, you know, and they tell what it weighs.
Yep.
Obviously, I don't have it. And would Smuggler's Notch appear as a warning on that system?
So
they had it?
So the way it works, so what you're referring to is GPS. So Waze is one of the one GPS tool.
WAYE?
WAZE. Yeah. And but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your question. I'm going to lump in all GPS sort of like I guess software packages. People use different ones. The most common though is Google Maps or or iPhone map. Yeah, those are the most common, but
Go ahead.
yeah, oh, no, it's okay. And so what the issue is Waze is one of them that is also common, but these common ones, what they're doing is these companies are catering to 99.99% of the drivers, which are people probably like us in our cars or SUVs or whatever, pickup trucks, whatever, that can make it to the notch just fine. And that's what they cater to. They don't, those companies don't necessarily care or cater to, like, they don't ask you, are you driving a semi right now? Because, you know, they don't ask that question. Unfortunately, people that are driving semis at times use those same tools. And so those tools don't warn you about anything. And we've all had the story, I'm sure, where we're driving our car and find ourselves following it blindly. Happened to me a few years ago in Maine, and all of a sudden I'm on like a class 4 road that's getting narrow and narrow. I'm like, yeah, this isn't right. I got to turn around, you know, and it just took me on that because it never asked me, are you driving a 4-wheel pickup with mud gripper tires? So that's the issue with that. We still work with them. We're trying to make headway, but they're not catering to what their mission set is different than ours. So, but go ahead. Sorry,
Well, they are getting better. I see I see all the time now, whenever I go by a tow truck. I was on a back road the other day and it said tow truck ahead. And I thought, there was a tow truck. I mean, and so, I see that over and over and over again. I've got to have been since the session, I bet it's been 3 times. So, where they actually alert you to a tow truck. So, I mean, they are getting better, but I don't,
But they can alert you when there's a truck stuck,
Yeah.
but they won't
Right.
prevent you from getting.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree. I think they are getting better, and that's why we're not shutting up. We still are pounding their door. We're letting know this is a problem in Vermont. There's other states that have problems similarly, you know, through mountain passes. And you know, the day
Loki that way.
No, but I think we've talked about it before.
No.
the day may come where the technology says, okay, these folks, you know, the technology becomes where a pop-up comes. If you're driving a semi or pulling a big camper or something, they might say you can't make it through, you know, those ifs, you know, or maybe they'll ask you what type of vehicle are you driving. You can fill out your profile, but it's not there. That's not what they're doing yet. So
So I think might be useful if you continue to knock on their door, as you just said. I would love if I was at VTrans, to broaden the conversation beyond just the notch. And I'd love to know if we're looking at using these apps, these crowdsourced reportings of roadkill, of cars on the sides of the road, not necessarily the cops aspect, but congestion and so on, to react to if we're not looking at if we're VTrans, the Department of Public Works, or at the local level, or the Vermont State Troopers, are we looking at where there are hotspots in real time to then address and direct our staffing?
we do, and so we do have ways, for example, we take their data that pipes into our transportation management center. So when we see suddenly something going awry on the road, and it'll turn red because, traffic will slow down or whatever it is, it alerts us. So we actually do that, but they also take our data. So we that's sort of the quid pro quo there, where it's a double swinging door. We share our data with them, they share their data with us.
Do you do that with the other providers?
Yeah, Google is the primary one, but we we keep our door open. We're not trying to play favoritism with anybody, but absolutely. So in the end, again, like our mission, I mean, their mission probably is to make money, but in the end, this common mission here is to serve the public and help people get to where they're trying to get to safely on time. So, anyhow, we are still working on the GPS front. We are making some headway. And by the way, there are some apps that you can get specifically if you're a trucker, and they're great. Like they're putting that in there, but not all truckers are using that app. So we've made some headway in that GPS front, but it's not perfect yet. So the scoping study was looking at, okay, what else can we do? And one idea that came up is the chicane. And I'll now define chicane. So chicane, and I'm going to go to a picture in a second here, but I just want to say that the chicane is basically emulating what happens at the top of the notch with rocks and tight curves that can get a truck hung up. We're emulating that further down the road at a location where a trucker could still turn around. And so we basically copy that same sort of like maneuver that they'd have to make with certain material that like delineators, rubber curbs, things we can put out there. And by the way, the chicane that I'm talking to right now, it's temporary. It's something we would install, and we intend to install this spring, and then take down in the fall and put it back out again in the spring when the notch opens up again. And so this is not a permanent fixture, but temporary. And one of the beauties of the chicane and why it kind of won out in the scoping study with all the public involvement was because it was a way to kind of do this. It's not hugely expensive. Not that was a big factor, honestly, but it's not hugely expensive. And it's something that we can try out there, and you can actually go out there and we can kind of tweak it on the fly. So if we kind of, even though it was rigorously tested, if we miscalculate on anything, we can go up there, during an off-peak hour, and we can actually move the rubber curbing and the delineators a little bit to kind of get it more dialed in. So it's going to take a couple days to install this. We are looking to install it on both sides of the road. I'm sorry, both sides of the notch, Cambridge side and the Stowe side. And there are a couple things that we don't have yet. We on the Smuggler's Notch side, we're good to go. We have all the agreements. We had to get agreements with the local ski areas because where we're putting them, we want them to be able to turn around in the driveway into their parking lots, and we're not going to direct traffic to turn around there without an agreement with that private entity, of course. So Smuggler's Notch, we're good to go. We don't have anything signed yet for Stowe, but as far as I know, Stowe's been at the table, and they've been super supportive of all this and been working great with us. So I have nothing but good things to say about Stowe. So while it's not signed yet, I have high hopes that it'll be signed by this spring. But I do put the caveat in there; it's not signed yet. So here's where I can just show you guys a little picture. I'm going to show you a zoom in of what the chicane will look like in a second, but just to kind of show you the locations here. You can see on the left side the Stowe. You can see that where the red circle is, that's where we want to put the chicane on that side. By the way, driving upwards on the screen, that's heading towards the notch.
That's the resort.
That's the resort is on the left there on the Stowe side. Yeah, you can see that's like the main drive to get to that resort. And that drive also is what would happen is a truck, if it got hung up, I'll say hung up, because it's not going to get hung up on delineators or a rubber curb.
Right.
A trucker could barrel through that, but the idea is that if a trucker hits the curb and feels the bump, or hears the delineator hit the side of their truck, and it's a rubber delineator, or sees it, if they're looking in the rearview mirror, they'll stop, back up, and then go back down the notch.
Signage to go with it.
There will absolutely be signage and to get them turned around. And is this gonna stop all of the trucks? I don't know. We haven't done it yet. I hope it does, but there is nothing that says that a truck could not, unless there's somebody there, like law enforcement or even, some volunteer that says, stop, if they try to barrel through, they still may try.
But is the idea, if it works, to do a permanent where they couldn't get through?
So
Once they backed up.
So what we would do, if this works, a permanent, I'll say implementation of the chicane could be done, but I will say it would go through the same project prioritization process.
Sure.
But I also say this, and we haven't explored permanent fixtures yet, what it would look like, but I don't think we would do it with a positive concrete barrier. I think even a permanent fixture would probably, and I don't know for sure, be something that would probably give a little bit, and they would know then to turn around and back up. But I don't know yet. We haven't looked into that. Right now, we've been focusing on the temporary just to see first, first step first, see if it works. Cambridge side, I don't think same kind of story. You can see that entranceway on the Cambridge side. The notch is also kind of upwards, sort of on that picture there. I'll go to the next one so that you guys can see. I'm sorry, these are engineering diagrams. I'm an engineer. I love diagrams like this, but you can see along the top there, you can kind of see how the road would curve around. See how it dips down there. That's the chicane. And so what you have there is where that whole road, the whole curve that it does is, it's delineated with rubber curbing and also rubberized delineators. So if you're a vehicle, you're gonna get through fine. You're gonna slow down, but you're gonna get through just fine. But if you're a trucker, you're either your tire's gonna hit the curb. If you're too big, your tire's gonna hit the curb, or you're gonna hit a delineator. And again, the hope is that at that point, they would see that, stop and back up
These
at
are
that
what we're
driveway.
calling delineators.
Yes, that is, yeah. So you're ahead of me. I can go down to that slide. And so the other, I'll just quickly, same side. This is the Cambridge side here. And again, you can kind of see where the road curves around there.
Down to the right. Goes down to the end of the screen.
So what you're seeing there where the cars are parked, good question. That's the other lane. And so,
No,
No, she
No,
means down the very corner.
wide area, looks like a landslide or something.
oh, right here,
Yeah.
this is a parking lot. Yep, and that's where they would turn around. I'm gonna point to this, it's just easier.
All the way down, that's a parking lot?
Yes.
Way down to the end of the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
And it, hard to see, black and white GPS, but this right here is what I thought you were talking about, but it bears, this is actually a good, this is what I thought you'd mentioned, but I will say it because this is the other lane right there. But the beauty of that also is if a truck does get stuck, if a stuckage occurs, I know you wanted to hear that word. Yes, I know. If a stuckage occurs at the chicane, then what we can, then while the truck is like doing kind of that, oh crap moment, but there's cars behind it or cars trying to get through, there is that lane is where folks would come down the mountain. But if that's clear, people can actually go around that truck and get out of their way so the trucker could then back up and get out and get turned around. So it kind of serves the dual purpose.
Pretty access to that parking lot's kind of narrow, isn't it?
Right here.
Just the way it looks.
Yeah, I think it is the way it looks, but yeah, I think it's why we've evaluated and there's room there for a big truck to turn around. So then finally, yeah, just show you guys the kind of materials we're looking at. Yeah, we're looking at the rubber curbing, which you would attach it to the pavement and you can pull it up in the fall, and then same with the delineators and the rubber. The barrels are also there, just, again, to get people's attention. People can hit them. It's probably not going to do anything a whole lot of good, but it's not going to hurt anybody. But the barrels are out there, and that's again, approved by, as a safe delineation device out there by the road. And yeah, so go ahead, sir. Yeah.
We make them big jugs of maple syrup instead of.
Yeah.
Sure thing. I'm gonna be up there all the time then. No, but it is, we're I guess, we're really excited about this. We've been talking about it. I know the public has written in about it. We've been evaluating this as a possibility. And so things are going to happen. I can say, like I said, on the Smuggler's Notch side, everything's signed. So we have every intention to go full steam ahead on that side. And also hopefully on the Stowe side as well.
How many of the stockages are from, I just assumed that almost all of them are from the Stowe side, but am I wrong?
No, it's about, it's funny. We've sort of had these internal, it's about half and half. It's about 50-50. Yeah. And to give you guys some numbers, because I don't have a slide on this. I mean, I guess the last is the discussion slide, but it's last 3 years, we've had 5 stockages. Prior to that, the average was around, it danced anywhere from like 8, 9, 10. I think the average was like 9.7 or something like that, when you do the average. But so the last 3 years, I think it's been down like 40%. You guys have been right there alongside us, but we've been putting a lot of effort into this, trying to, stop trucks from getting stuck in the notch. And we've been doing a lot of signage stuff and a lot of, kind of like, I'll say like kind of maybe some media blasts with like Facebook, things like that. But that signage has been a big thing. And I think just the regular awareness has been risen too, because, the press has done some articles on it. And so I think it's gotten out there in front of people's face more than before, which we're very happy with. And I think that partly is what's driven the numbers down. But we're hoping that the chicane, I don't want to sit here and say it's going to bring it down to 0. I hope it does. But I hope it brings it down to lower than 5. So we're excited. We'll let you know, obviously, how it goes.
So basically, we talked about doing something like this. So why haven't we done this before?
Believe it or not, well, part of it is we had a process too that led us here, where it was that public involvement piece, because this is it's a sensitive road. There's a lot of, and aesthetics is important, and that's been, that was also a factor that was considered throughout this, and why we had the locals there at the table too. but yeah, it's just following the process, to make sure that what we get out there is something that folks can buy into, and we've done that. And I also want to just give a shout out, like, the Green Mountain Club has been amazing to work with. They're awesome. And also the, is it Forest and Parks and Recreation, from, under, I guess that's under A&R. Amazing to work with as well. And they're so like energized to be out there, and they're great at giving us like anecdotal information. And I think those two organizations I just mentioned, I think they've even gone and actually like waved down trucks at times.
We've heard that sometimes truckers still ignore them.
I think they do, and unfortunately, but people are all gathering together trying to do this. This is a good example where, you know, Vermonters are just all kind of joining hands and trying to make it better out there. So, yeah, so I've got more to come, but this is where we stand right now. So
what is the estimated cost of these temporary structures?
You know, I thought that question may come up. I don't know the answer. I want to say it might be. I don't even want to say this. This is a guess. It's not a guess. It's an educated guess. I think it's around maybe around 100K, something like that, maybe total.
Quite modest, frankly, in the scheme of things.
Yeah, it's not. If you want and more exact, I can get it to you. Okay, but it's compared to a roundabout. I mean, it's a small percentage. But yeah, this is not big bucks when you look at the transportation budget. So
the big bucks are getting towed out.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing. Yeah, and people on motorcycles will probably have fun going around the.
Hopefully they slow down, but yeah, I mean, it's going to give them a curve it's going to give them the curve that they're going to see at the top. So, yeah.
Okay. Senator Schindler.
I don't know if he wants to be put on the spot, but I'd love to know if Bill Smith with the bus and tow a truck has anything to say about these.
Sure, that's right, yeah. Bill Smith from Vermont Truck and Bus Association, support this. I think it's a great idea. The keys obviously are the turnaround near chicane, and it sounds like you got that nailed down. In fact, I was looking at my GPS on my phone going, where would I put this? And it was right there, so thank you. I mean, it was a good sensible spot for it. Sounds like this will improve it, and if it doesn't, let's keep at it.
Absolutely. And if you hear anything, if there's anything that you guys hear that you think that would help us, like, please, I mean, you're not shy, but don't be shy. Let us know. We want to work with everybody here, and yeah.
And on the GPS, discussions, would love to be part of that. I can say that most of these truckers don't use a commercial package GPS. They're looking at their Apple iPhone or their Samsung Galaxy, and that's what they're getting, a Google or iPhone. So, until that they're looking at that. And then we found, I think one thing we can say about the notch is that all the signage in the world does not trump one of these little phones.
Yeah.
We're all looking at them. And we believe this more than our own eyes. It's human behavioral issue that sounds like you might have another shot at improving here. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
You're bringing the realities of the road limitation right to the driver before they have to have the actual experience.
And they know enough if they don't read English to figure it out.
But I said, you can ignore a sign. It's tough to ignore something in the road.
Yeah.
Right. But the signs will have to go with the things in the road, because they just might like, well, that was a weird thing.
Right. It's going to be signs. They're going to know. Yeah. They'll know if they get hung up, if you hit anything, like you need to turn around. We're going to sign that. Yeah. Yeah. So
I did have one more safety question for the safety program.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, I was looking at states' stack limits for impaired driving, and this state of Utah has lowered. They're the only state that has a lower limit. And at the time, whoever came in from the governor's safety program said, "Oh, we're looking at that, and we're interested to see how that's impacting things." And I don't know if you had any.
I would have to get back to you on that to see if there is any updated data that's coming out of the state.
Yeah, and I don't think any other state has done it, but
yeah. So I would, I'd be happy to see if there's any information on that.
Yeah. I haven't introduced my bill because I got so beat up on it. But nobody's interested in extra. Yeah.
Now I understand why you remembered it.
Yeah. No. They got a lot of unwelcome comments. Nobody wants to lower the alcohol content. That's what I found. But I just would be interested if the evidence is that that is makes a big difference. I mean, in Utah is a different population, so I don't know if that plays into it. But there's a lot of countries that have a much lower BAC than we do.
Yes.
Because the information like this thing that you guys put out, I assume, I think it says this is when it was called the Governor's Highway Safety Program.
Oh, yes.
It does talk about how you're impaired at a lower alcohol content. So that the wording on here is good, even though it's a legal limit is higher. But that's why other countries have said if you're impaired, then it should be at a lower limit if you are actually trying to limit crashes.
Yes.
So if there's any new data on there, I would be interested.
Happy to do this.
That's my only last safety question. Any other questions? Senator Mazza, anything about bikes?
No, sounds good.
There's no bikes that's ever been caught in the notch.
How about Corvettes?
I'm sure there's one. Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.